gave up a TV job to start a podcast in your basement. If that doesn't scream midlife crisis, I don't know what does.
It was Championship Sunday here in Indianapolis. What's the mindset then coming in as a defending champion?
I want to win. No, I want to win.
The young lady over my shoulder, Caitlin Clark.
Not the best looking guy. And I don't think anyone's going to sit here and say, Matt Randazzo was really good looking.
What has this last month, 2 months, 3 months been like for you? It's an important fan base for the Fighting Illini, is it not?
It is.
He turned 69 years young last week. You look good, Coach.
Oh, try it. Thank you.
Welcome to Off the Air, a Tuesday edition of the show. Happy Tuesday to everyone out there. A lot to get to, a lot to talk about on today's show. First and foremost, thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching on YouTube right now. The chat is up and going. I'm trying to multitask, and hopefully I can pay more attention to the chat as the days and the weeks and the months go by. But always your participation is nice during the show. Of course, big show today, a lot to get to. It was a bad night for college basketball. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but our good friend Nicholas Baer, the former Hawkeye and former Bettendorf standout, will join us in just a little bit to talk about Iowa's tough night in Columbus and a lot more. Also on the show, somebody I've been trying to track down for a few weeks now, and we finally were able to connect. Our technology connected as well, and super excited to chat with Kevin Tippet. Of course, Coach Tippet, one of the best in the business, just stepped down recently after 18 very successful years at North Scott. Someone that I've become good friends with over the years as well. So we'll sit and we'll chat with Coach Tippet about his decision to leave the North Scott football program, what may be next in the future for him, also what the future looks like for North Scott football, and a lot of memories along the way. So Coach Tippet coming up probably around 10:30 today on the show. Also coming up in the second hour, of course, everyone this weekend talking about Madison Keys, and rightfully so. The Quad City native, the Rock Island native, finally breaking through and winning that Grand Slam. And when I say finally breaking through, I don't mean that in a negative way, because it's awfully difficult to do, but it's someone that everyone kind of thought maybe peaked back in 2018 when she was ranked 7th in the world. But she got it done this past weekend in thrilling fashion. And coming up in hour 2, we're going to be joined by Tim Eldridge. Tim was Madison's personal coach here in the Quad Cities before she moved down to Florida. Obviously somebody who has kept up with Madison Keys, kept in communication with her. So we'll talk to Coach Eldridge, Tim Eldridge, coming up about Madison Keys and watching her from afar and the success that she's had for not just herself, but for Rock Island and the Quad Cities. That's coming up in hour number 2. So a lot to get to. If you missed yesterday's show, a lot of fun on a Monday. It's always good to be joined by Pat Angerer. Of course, Pat had plenty of opinions to get to. We talked about his vacation, which is always interesting when you hear about Pat talking about himself in Jamaica. So there's that. Plus, he talked about the Bears' new offensive coordinator, Declan Doyle, someone with close ties to the University of Iowa. So we talked about that. We also talked about Iowa wrestling and a lot more with Pat Angerer. Also yesterday, Chad Leistico from the Des Moines Register and Iowa City Press Citizen. If you missed that, check it out. I don't know too many people that's covered Caitlin Clark more than Chad Leistico over the last couple of years. So we got some information from him, some memories from him, as it's a big weekend coming up in Iowa City, as Iowa will welcome Caitlin Clark back to Carver Hawkeye Arena. More importantly, they welcome USC to town in a big matchup on the hardwood. So it'll be a huge Sunday in Iowa City. We talked to Chad Leistico about Iowa women's basketball, Caitlin Clark, Iowa men's basketball, which struggled last night once again, and a lot more. So check out Chad Leistico on yesterday's show as well. And also Don Umlin joined us to talk a little bit of officiating after everyone is in outrage about the Kansas City Buffalo game, and maybe rightfully so this past weekend. So check out yesterday's show. You can check it out on YouTube right here, or you can check it out on all the podcasting platforms as well. Excited about that. Finally up on Apple Podcasts, and that's helped you guys, and it's helped me and myself and my numbers as well. So that's something always exciting to check out. Also, coming up tomorrow, it's Wednesday, so tomorrow is another edition of Wild Man Wednesday. We'll be joined by my former sports director, my mentor, Dan Burrich, for another Wildman Wednesday. Dan and I will talk plenty of sports, of course. If people don't remember Dan Burrich, a longtime sportscaster here in the area, but also when I first kind of ran into him or knew of him, he created K-Jock a long time ago, sports radio right here in the Quad Cities. That's what I grew up listening to. I remember cutting my dad's grass, my parents' grass, or cutting my neighbor's grass and sitting there with my Walkman probably on and listening to K-Jock. Dan would do a show in the morning and at night. So super excited to have Dan on tomorrow's show, Wildman Wednesdays, once again. Also, we'll be catching up with Trent Wallace, Assumption standout, former Big Ten pitcher of the year. Had a fantastic season with the Blue Jays this past year. He got up to AAA, so he's now knocking on the footsteps or the doorstep. That makes more sense. Knocking on the door to the major leagues. He's down with some extended spring training down in Florida. Just moved down there this past weekend, so we'll chat with Trent Wallace on tomorrow's show as well. Also, later in the week, Julian Vandervelde will be joining me once again. Of course, Julian played for the Philadelphia Eagles, so we'll get his insights on Philly. And also Cooper DeJean, the Iowa standout rookie for Philadelphia, who'll be playing in the Super Bowl once again. So Julian Vandervelde coming up later this week. Also, more with Caitlin Clark and the Caitlin Clark mania that'll happen in Iowa City this next weekend. An old employee of mine, and I shouldn't call her an employee because she's also a good friend, Camille Gear, who covered Caitlin Clark with WQAD while she was here in the Quad Cities. We had her on that beat nonstop, so she'll be in later this week as well. Also, still tracking down Caleb Johnson. Couldn't connect last night where we were hoping to, so we've rescheduled that. We'll have Caleb Johnson hopefully later this week on the show, Alex Tanney later this week on the show, and a lot more. So plenty to get to. Hopefully you guys are enjoying what we're doing here. It's Off the Air with Matt Randazzo, a daily streaming Quad City sports show right here in the Quad Cities. So if you enjoy it, tell a friend or two or 10 if you can do that as well. Subscribers up to over 600. Two different extremes last night when it comes to the Cyclones and the Hawkeyes. We'll start with Iowa State as the Cyclones went to Arizona. They're in the midst of one of those West Coast, and I know it's not West Coast, but going west trips. Iowa did it when they went to USC and UCLA. The Iowa women did it recently when they went to Oregon and Washington. With conference expansion, there's going to be these longer road trips where you're going to stay on the road for a week. That is what Iowa State is doing. They won at Arizona State on Saturday. Last night, playing a late night Monday night game at Arizona. And while the Wildcats struggled to start the season, they're super talented. They've been playing some really good basketball of late, and that was in a great environment at Arizona. It came down to the wire, and we'll kind of show you what happened late in this one. Iowa State at the free throw line looking to take a 3-point lead, and we'll pick it up and show you how it finished. Looking to take a 3-point lead, and they do so with the free throw with just 2.2 seconds left. Arizona inbounds it. Iowa State chooses not to foul, which I believe is the correct decision, but they get the ball into Caleb Love, who pulls up from about 55 feet and buries the once-in-a-lifetime maybe type of shot. That forces overtime, and it's all Arizona in the overtime as Arizona goes on to knock off Iowa State last night in dramatic fashion. And you get up and I stayed up late and watched it live, and you get up this morning and you read social media, and there's a lot of second guesses where you can look in this game. Do you miss the second free throw so they can't cleanly inbounds the basketball? I think you're kind of over analyzing it. And also, do you foul? Do you foul once the ball gets in bounds down or up 3 with a second left? Obviously things you can do, but I think people are looking way too much into it. I said once in a lifetime shot, maybe not once in a lifetime shot, but 1 in 100. If he shoots that 100 times, he's maybe going to make it once, and that's probably being generous. So a tough break for Iowa State. And that's what's going to happen on the road in the Big 12. It's a really, really good conference this year. So Iowa State falls to 16-3 overall, their second loss in conference play. Big picture, it's something that Iowa State wants. They want that regular season Big 12 championship. They'll go to the conference tournament. They always play well in the conference tournament. But I think when you're an Iowa State fan, and they still have those goals in front of them, but I think if you're an Iowa State fan, that's not the main goal this season. The main goal isn't a Big 12 championship. This team's sights are set on March and maybe getting to that Final Four, maybe getting to that national championship game, maybe winning a national championship. That's how good this team is. They went on the road in the Big 12, which we've seen can be very, very difficult, and they lost a tough game that, yeah, they probably should have won. Once that shot goes in, Arizona, they're going to win in overtime. That's the all the momentum are on the Wildcats side, and they go on and they do so. So Iowa State now done with that trip to Arizona. They'll come back home, look to get back on track soon. So we'll talk more about Iowa State later this week. We'll track down Jake Brend and get his thoughts on the Cyclones later this week right here on Off the Air. On the other side of things, while Iowa State was losing a close, tight game on the road in the Big 12, the Iowa Hawkeyes lost again on the road, and it's become not just a trend, but it's kind of become what's expected when Iowa hits the road. They lost once again. Their average margin of defeat on the road is 16.8 points per game. So nearly 17 points a game they're losing by on the road. Things close early on, despite Iowa struggling from distance. They struggled from three-point range all evening, but in the first half, 22 of the 26 points came from Drew Thelwell and Owen Freeman. Owen Freeman very good in the first half, 11 points. Iowa, despite those struggles, played good defense early, only trailed by 4 at the half. Second half, a different story. They gave up 52 points in the second half. They continued to struggle from 3. And one thing you can't have is Josh Dix and Brock Harding combined for 0 of 10 from the field. If those two guys aren't scoring at all, you're not going to go on the road and win too many games in the Big Ten. Peyton Sanford had 13 points, took 16 shots, so not an efficient night from the senior as well. Owen Freeman really good in the first half. I think Ohio State made a nice adjustment on him in the second half, but bottom line is Owen didn't play a lot of the second half because didn't need to. Definitely didn't need to. The team struggling early on, or late in the game, so didn't play a lot late in the blowout game. I shouldn't say didn't need to, but didn't play a lot in a blowout game. So a tough loss when it comes to the Iowa Hawkeyes. We'll catch up with Nicholas Baer here in just a little bit. Nicholas will get us caught up on his thoughts of the Iowa basketball team. The Iowa Hawkeyes falling now to 4-6 in Big Ten play. They get the next 8 days off. So Nicholas Baer right around the corner. A few other things I want to talk about. The Bears have a new defensive coordinator. It's Dennis Allen. That's not the news. The news now this morning is that Matt Eberflus flying to Dallas. He will most likely become the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator. And I know Bears fans will kind of laugh about that and all those kind of things. Obviously, Matt Eberflus not a great head football coach. Pretty good defensive mind, pretty good defensive coordinator. I don't love what they're doing in Dallas. I think it's been a circus down there, especially with Jerry Jones leading things. But I think Matt Eberflus is a good defensive coordinator, probably a good hire for the Cowboys. Don't love their head coaching hire by any stretch of the imaginations, but former Bears coach Matt Eberflus heading to Dallas, most likely going to be their defensive coordinator. A big Tuesday night of high school basketball coming up. In the MAC, it is a big game between state-ranked team Pleasant Valley and Central DeWitt on the ladies' side of things. So we'll see who can kind of take a stranglehold on this conference race. Kind of tight up at the top with Davenport North, Central DeWitt, and, of course, Pleasant Valley. So a big game there. Also on the boys' side of things, huge game at George Marshall Gym. 8-2 Central hosting 8-2 Davenport North. And that's for first place in the MAC as well. So a big matchup at Davenport Central tonight. Muscatine in the mix right there at 8-2 in the MAC. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about those games tomorrow on the show. A full slate in the Western Big Six as well. So a lot of high school stuff to get to tomorrow and then later on throughout the week, as it's a fun time of year from both college basketball and high school basketball as well. Well, coming up next, after a quick break, we'll be joined by Nicholas Baer. We'll kind of dissect and figure out what's going on with Iowa basketball as they lost another one on the road. Also coming up in the show later on around 10:30, Kevin Tippet, the former North Scott head football coach, will chat with us. Plenty of memories to get to. So it's a loaded show on a Wednesday. You're watching Off the Air. We'll be right back in less than a minute with Nicholas Baer. Are you looking for the Quad City's best chips and salsa? There's only one dude to turn to.
Right on.
Snoop. hand-cut chips, fried fresh with that crunch you've come to love. And the most addicting salsa with delicious fresh ingredients each and every time. Pick up your chips and salsa, queso, enchiladas, and much more at the Stern Center in Rock Island. To place your order, simply call the man himself. It's Snoop at 309-314-8197 and find out for yourself what the rest of the Quad Cities already loves. Welcome back to Off the Air on a Tuesday. It was a rough Monday night for the Iowa Hawkeyes on the road, and the road has not been a good place for Iowa so far this season. They lose last night, again by double figures to Ohio State, and it had me longing for the days of this guy. The Bear Cage, Nicholas Baer, joins us now to break down a frustrating Monday night for the Iowa basketball team. First and foremost, hi Bear Cage, how are you, buddy?
Matt Randazzo, I'm doing all right. I've been better, but I'm doing all right. I'm doing much better now. I get a chance to hang out with you.
Yeah, well, I wish we had better stuff to talk about, but another tough night on the road in the Big Ten. I know that's something that people pound away at right now. This team hasn't been good on the road. Life on the road in the Big Ten is always difficult, but for these guys, especially of late, it has been difficult, and it's not been close. I think it's the frustrating part. What are the main things you take away from another loss on the road or in Columbus, I should say?
Yeah, tough one. I think the reason this one stands out a little bit is I felt like in some of our previous games on the road, obviously defense has been a huge struggle, giving up, upwards of 90 points in a couple of them. But I feel like in this scenario, I know scorer line says 82, but on the whole, I thought our defense was much better, especially in the first half. Holding Ohio State to 30 points. In that regard, I thought we were rebounding the ball pretty well first half, defending without fouling. Just really couldn't hit a whole lot of shots in that first half, where I thought the game probably shifted a little bit. You make a few of those big threes or transition buckets, like maybe this game's a little bit different. Obviously, it fell apart a little bit in the second half, but I think on the whole, the 82 part, we're fouling at the end, trying to press, trying to create turnovers. So I have a little bit of encouragement from that, but yeah, the general consensus of struggling on the road is a pattern that unfortunately continues here.
You look at the last two losses, and even Penn State, while it was a victory, the offense wasn't the way it looked earlier in the season. And then Minnesota, it didn't look good. And tonight it struggled. I think Iowa fans have come to accustom that if they're going to lose games, it's going to be because of that defense we kind of talked about. But the offense seems how does Fran usually put it? They seem sideways. That's what Fran always
sideways.
Say. They seem
that's
sideways,
the adjective.
to use a Franism, which I don't know if people want to hear Franisms right now, but it is sideways. What is it about this offense maybe that you can pinpoint, maybe not just last night, but the last 3 games?
Yeah, I think tonight the bummer for me is I thought we were getting good looks for the most part. I thought we had a few steals. Our press was bothering, especially in the first half. Had a few steals. Thought we had some good looks between Josh and Peyton that just didn't go. Looks that I think are good shots. Thankfully, Thelwell stepped up with a couple. Owen was the bright spot in the first half for sure. 11-7. Was really, really surprised that Ohio State decided to cover him that way. With single coverage, he went right at those bigs and was able to score and just keep us in it, for the most part. So I think one thing I've probably picked up on a little bit more is I think Coach is trying to run a few more sets than he has in the past. Usually, we just rely on the motion game to kind of generate the offense that we're looking for and get us good looks. But I've seen him go to sets a little bit more, especially in the second half, to try to get guys open and generate success that way. So, motion game struggling a little bit, but obviously it hurts when you don't make shots. So I thought the looks we got tonight, for the most part, especially in the first half, were pretty good. Started forcing a few in the second, but overall, I would say probably a little bit more of a structure around some set plays that I've noticed a little bit.
A lot of times you look at a Fran McCaffrey team and you see a lot of depth. And I know Fran's had years where he's had almost maybe the depth was too much, where he was playing too many guys. And you look at a night like last night with Josh Dix struggling, which we'll talk about him in a second, Brock not playing well, not scoring. And you had for a minute, I think late in the second half, I think only 4 guys had scored. The depth isn't there this year. And if you got starters struggling, it magnifies that. if there's no way to go to the bench and turn to somebody. I guess maybe just talk about the lack of weapons maybe, or maybe not as much depth. I don't want to say lack of weapons, but it doesn't feel like Fran trusts as many guys as he has on some teams in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a tough go in that regard for sure. I know coach is kind of playing like a little bit more of a shorter lineup. Only lone bright spot I would say was, I thought Riley Mulvey did a pretty good job here tonight, at least from a defensive standpoint, being active. But had a couple nice kick out passes, so that was probably the lone bright spot. But yeah, I mean, typically in the teams I was playing on, even if you were 9th, 10th guy, like, you're still having a shot to get some minutes and providing value when you're out there. So I think some of it could be a little bit tough to get a rhythm as well coming off the bench for some of these guys, if that can be an issue. But I noticed towards the end of the game, like he was, having Trey Oregon extended run, good. I thought, letting Riley have an extended run, having some of these guys potentially get some of their rhythm back a little bit. But yeah, I mean, sometimes some of the best lineups are when we go with a little bit of a shorter bench, but definitely searching for answers in some regard.
And I don't want to blame last night on the bench, because the bench wasn't the problem. When you have two starters that go 0 for 10 combined, and I'm a self-admitted biased Brock Harding fan, and he struggled last night, and you're a self-admitted Josh Dix fan, and he struggled last night. How do you get those two going? And it's been a while for Josh now. This has been like 2 or 3 games where it's just not there. And have you ever been in a situation like that where you go through shooting slumps, you go through, a game or two where you're just not right, and how do you get out of something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely – I think there was some stat, obviously, in the first half. I think we had 26 points. 22 of them were from Thelwell and Owen Freeman. So when you don't get that much of a production from anybody else, it's going to make it difficult on the road in the Big Ten. But I felt thankful it was just 4, at that time, in the first half. But, yeah, I mean, I've definitely had games where I didn't shoot it well, right? I think – and I know this is probably the area where coaches would likely be talking with Josh a little bit is, he gets more upset when you just stop shooting. Especially when you're a good shooter like Josh is. I felt like there were a couple times where maybe he turned down some looks that would have been good looks. Like I know, he hasn't hit one yet, but it turned down some looks to where we didn't get the things we wanted in a possession. So I'm sure the message to him is likely, hey, brother, we need you to shoot. Like especially if Josh wasn't, playing at that level, like the margin for error drops. The margin of error gets pretty thin. So I think for him, it's just, continue to shoot even if it's, kind of an off night, like, got to find a way to be effective that way.
Yeah, and to his credit, the reason you realize nights like tonight is because he was so good earlier in the season. And when I say early in the season, Nicholas, it wasn't that long away. That's the crazy part about the Big Ten season is you talk about, man, he's struggled for a while. 2 weeks ago, he was one of the best players in the Big Ten. So it just takes those type of, ups and downs and ebbs and flow in Big Ten play. They get the next 8 days off before they play again. If you're on the Iowa basketball team right now, do you like that? Do you not like that? And what do you do in these next week to get back on track, to get healthy, to get rested? How would you approach this little mini bye in the middle of the season?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like pretty much every season there's this kind of like extended bye of either like 6 or 7 days that you have. And a lot of it kind of depends on how the season's going, right? I've been on teams where we were number 3 in the country. At one point, it was kind of just business as usual. I've been on teams where we had pretty poor showings, 14 to 19. That was not a really fun 8 days by any means. But I think for this group, like, thankfully, we don't have a whole lot of, injury problems. I know Peyton's got a few lingering things probably, but on the whole, like, this time you want to get guys healthy, keep guys healthy. I would imagine, though, like, they're probably going to be some pretty competitive practices, which I always kind of like because at this point in the season, typically, it's a pretty regimented, going through scout team, defending whatever the opposing team's running, running our own stuff, getting up and down only like a little bit, not a ton. And then, from there, just getting some shooting. So the practices are generally pretty light from a, workload standpoint. But this time I would imagine these practices are going to be pretty competitive, a few different drills, which I'm sure they'll be running to kind of, see who really wants to maybe stand out and step up. But I think it is a good opportunity, though, for a lot of these guys if, these next 8 days, kind of like you said, like if you want to make a jump, potentially like, up your minutes, I'm sure coach is probably gonna be looking for answers somewhere. So, obviously not in this position where we want to be Big Ten wise, but I mean, at the same time, Matt, like, I know the hour's getting late regarding the NCAA tournament for sure. But I mean, you look at eight of the, I think it's 8 more games left that we have that are quad one opportunities, and these next 2 ones are pretty important at home against Purdue, against Wisconsin on a Saturday day game. So, I would love to be invited back on the show potentially, next week after 2 big wins, and then it's a whole different story potentially, especially at home. So, we'll see. But I think there's definitely still time to make a run, and hopefully these next 8 days we can figure some things out internally.
I got 2 more quick ones for you. Seydou Traore, beginning of the season, kind of flashes, shows some nice things, gets people excited, gets fans excited, kind of went through a little bit of a lull and seems to be playing well recently. And obviously making a step up in play, transferring to a Big Ten program. What have you seen from him as a whole? And is that somebody that maybe Iowa fans can start getting excited about in a season they're looking for a few things to get motivated and get excited for?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously I know when you first joined, definitely popped out for Iowa fans. And I think the thing too is, I think as the Big Ten season goes on, these coaches are really good at scouting and really good at being able to identify how to defend guys. So I think it's not entirely surprising that the higher competition we faced, that he kind of faced a little bit of a wall that way or got stifled. But I mean, played pretty well tonight. I thought, especially pretty active in the press. Got to the line quite a bit, even though we were in the double bonus. Was making plays that way. So I'm a hope so. I think the one thing coach is probably going to be doing over the next 8 days as well is tinkering with different lineups, both in practice, running in competitive situations, things like that. So I think that's a guy where if we're going to make a little bit of a jump and he comes off the bench and kind of be a little bit more consistent, that'd be huge. But just even from a defensive energy standpoint, rebounding, like that's the one area where this team's struggling a little bit. So like if he can come in and kind of help clean up the defensive glass like he did a little bit tonight, like I think just small plays like that are going to go a long way potentially as well, especially against some of these other teams that are going to be pretty big that we play against. All
right, last one for you. We mentioned after the break it's at home versus Purdue, at home versus Wisconsin, and now you're looking. It's February by that point. Must-win situations when it comes to that week at home in the Big Ten when they get back off this mini break?
I mean, I think so. Like, especially at home. I know the road's always going to be a challenge in the Big Ten regardless, but I think getting a chance to play 2 big games at home, not only just for what it does for the resume, but what it can do for just like the momentum of the season. I know February is a time, recently we've been able to kind of turn things around and get some wins, and where the staff's really been able to, put us in positions to be successful. So I think it starts here, right? No better opportunity than you're getting a chance to play Purdue at home and Wisconsin at home. So still reason to be optimistic on my end, at least. I'm a big fan of the program and everything. I want to see these guys succeed, but for these next 2 games, I think obviously pretty important to win and to also get some guys playing pretty well.
And I checked before Nicholas came on. He does not have any eligibility left, so there will be no more 3-pointers at Carver Hawkeye or anything like that from Nicholas. But they could have used you tonight, my friend. They could have used you on Monday night. It was a tough one for the Hawkeyes. He's Nicholas Baer, former Hawkeye. We appreciate your insight. It's spot on as always. And yeah, we'll celebrate next week after a couple big victories.
There we go. That's the plan. Thanks, Matt.
All right. Appreciate you. He is Nicholas Baer. We got a lot more to get to. You're watching Off the Air on a Tuesday.
Hello, Dan Pearson here of FCA. Our team is thrilled to support Off the Air with our good friend Matt Randazzo. We share the view of the power of sport when it comes to relationships, including the influence of the coach. FCA believes the coach is the most influential person in America. Matt celebrates local coaches and athletes. His content is informational, insightful, and inspirational. Our Fellowship of Christian Athlete team loves partnering with Off the Air with Matt Randazzo while we engage, equip, and empower coaches and athletes in our 23 counties. FCA, the heart and soul in sports.
View from the West. the podcast covering Illinois high school football.
It's going to be a hard-hitting game. It's going to be great football.
Weekly analysis and reaction from around the western side of the state of Illinois.
This is the game we had circled when the year started.
Follow along on YouTube and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's big-time football out there tonight, and I know we can play big-time football.
You from the West. We got you covered.
Are you looking for the Quad City's best chips and salsa? There's only one dude to turn to.
Right on.
Snoop. Hand-cut chips, fried fresh with that crunch you've come to love. And the most addicting salsa with delicious fresh ingredients each and every time. Pick up your chips and salsa, queso, enchiladas, and much more at the Stern Center in Rock Island. To place your order, simply call the man himself. It's Snoop at 309-314-8197 and find out for yourself what the rest of the Quad Cities already loves. Welcome back to Off the Air. It was another fun, successful high school football season here in the Quad City area. A lot of big stories during the year and a couple big stories after the season, including one up in Eldridge where longtime, very successful head coach Kevin Tippet decided to step down after 18 years at North Scott. So what a better time to catch up with the man himself than right now. Kevin Tippet joins me. First and foremost, thanks for doing this. Nothing's ever easy in life, including technology for both of us. So at long last, we finally connect and get to chat. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me. And sorry I couldn't figure out the technology earlier. I'm just glad it's working now.
No, trust me, it's both of us. It's both of us. So you're a quote unquote retired guy. I guess so am I. But you're working a lot harder these days than I am. After making the decision and now a couple months afterwards, what's life like for Kevin Tippet? And life after football has begun, I guess.
It has. I mean, it hasn't, I don't think, really set in. Life after, for a retired guy, I'm still working a lot because I'm getting up every morning and going to work every day. But, it's enjoying. I'm focused on my teaching a little more. And, it still really hasn't hit me, and I don't think it will until next fall on Friday nights or maybe, next summer when I'm not knee deep in, helping develop kids. But, right now it's kind of like a typical off season, except for I'm not working through all the, film and off season stuff, getting ready for next year.
Yeah, you know what? Obviously, never an easy decision when you come to it. Can you walk me through kind of what went into it? And I know that you love what you do, and you're really good at doing it. So I know it wasn't an easy decision by any stretch of the imagination.
No, Matt, it wasn't. And I've told a lot of people this. I'm not done coaching. I'm done for now. I think, the time I remember when I got hired, and about the time I got hired, Ed Morrissey had just stepped down at Pleasant Valley, because when I got hired at North Scott, Rusty, who was one of my best friends, and I got hired exactly the same offseason. In fact, our first game head coaching as both of us was against each other. And I remember at the time, Coach Morrissey had just finished, and I want to say it's something like 24 or 28 years or something as head coach at Pleasant Valley. And I remember talking, I said, there's no way I could put that much time in because of the time and the expectations of running a high level program and what it goes into in the off season. I thought it would be 8-10 years and I'd be done. And 18 years later, here we are. But, what goes into making that decision was, it was hard, really hard, because it was really emotional. I was a blubbering mess when I talked to my staff. Really couldn't keep it together. And same thing with the kids the next day. If you know me at all, I'm a pretty emotional person. But if I couldn't be all in, I didn't want to do it. And I found myself a little bit here and there. I'm like, wow, it's a beautiful day tonight. It'd be a cool night to go, grab the Jeep and go for a ride with my wife. Or on a Saturday afternoon when I'm up watching Cade play, I'm like, it'd be nice to be able to hang out here at the tailgate with the families a little bit longer instead of having to race back and get back on film breakdown for the next opponent. And I felt like I didn't want to make any decision during the season, so I waited till after, and I wanted the emotional part of, the season to get done. But I felt like it was the right time. Jace going to college, me wanting to do some other things professionally. And the best feelings, I just felt tired.
Coach, you look at it and you mention your wife, family, your boys. Coaching is a demanding profession. I don't think people maybe realize that all the way. They figure, yeah, that's longer hours, but it's demanding. You just mentioned not just the practice time, but you're thinking about it when you're not at practice, when you're not at the games. To be able to do it as long as you have gotten to do, how important is it to have, I kind of compare it a little bit. All you guys are much cooler than sports people, or sportscasters, but I kind of compare it the same way to my family. You know, my wife's a rock star, and I know that your family not only supported you and allowed you to do this, but they encouraged you to do it all these years as well.
Yeah, you know, and I talked to, you know, Jody and I have kind of talked about this on and off for probably a few years. I'm like, when's the right time? But, you know, I always say it's what we do. It's not who we are. But in the same breath, I mean, it kind of dominates the landscape of our life. Like when you take vacations and when I can help out at home and, you know, what I'm not doing in the fall. And, but it's been awesome. You know, I'm not a North Scott native. Jody was. And, you know, her and I both kind of, we did it together, you know, the home team as far as, you know, tag team in this. But, you know, she's been vice president and officer in our booster club for the last 10 or 12 years as well. So, I mean, it's kind of like it has been a family affair, all of us kind of, you know, doing this. And outside of her, the first person I probably told was Jace.
What were their reactions? Were they surprised? Were they, I want to say happy, because was it a mixed reaction, I guess? What were their reactions?
Yeah, you know, Jody and I, it was never a one-day discussion.
Yeah.
You know, her and I had kind of, you know, talked about it a long time. So there was, you know, with Jace, I was like, he came home one night and, you know, he'd been at the rescue facility. And I'm like, I'm thinking this is the thing I want to go. And he's like, I don't think he was completely surprised, but, you know, there's a lot of questions. As an 18-year-old, and I've been head coach for as long as he's been alive. So that's all he's known. I mean, as far as, you know, growing up and being ball boy and at games and sideline. And, but I felt, you know, that was, you know, being able to tell Kate, I couldn't tell him in person because he'd already gone back to college. But, you know, they all completely understood. I mean, they see the time and the hours that went into it, so they get it.
Coach, you took over a program in your first year. You didn't make the postseason. And then every single year since, 17 years. Did you think at the end of that first year that you'd be sitting 18 years later with some knucklehead on YouTube talking about a 17-year playoff streak? That's got to be something that you're extremely proud of. But take me back to the end of year one. Did you like where you were at year one? Could you see it going in the right direction in year one? Did you think it'd get to where it was at after year one?
Actually, no. I hated where it was at the end of year one. You know, you can go back further than that. I worked for Dave Jacobson, who was head coach for 5 years previously to me being hired. And, you know, we made the playoffs his previous last 2 years and exited first round. His last year, we went 9-0, beat Bettendorf week 9, and then lost Iowa City high in the playoffs. But when I took over, I'm thinking, okay, who am I to mess up? You know, we just went 9-0. We played, it was like Bettendorf, whatever that game was, like 1 versus 3 or whatever in 4A at the time. And I'm like, who am I to make a lot of changes? So what I did is we just kind of ran Dave's offense, except I called the plays. We ran my defense, except Tim Brunken kind of ran it. And we were good. We were 6-3, but it never felt right. So that offseason, our staff really went, you know, we dug deep, and I watched a lot of, you know, tape. I watched a lot of film. I learned a lot of stuff at clinics. I'm like, as a D coordinator, I hated defending the spread and some of the wide open stuff. And I'm like, this is where we're going to go. And it was nerve wracking. We went to team camp that summer at Central and we looked awful. I came home and said, this is the biggest mistake we ever made. We're not going to win a game. And it really fit our kids well. We went 8-1, made the playoffs last year, and we never looked back. But it was, you know, it was, as coaches, I think that's been one of the best things our staff has done, is not been afraid to make changes. And I think that's been one of the best things for us, and I think it's kept us fresh. And, you know, we've had really good kids along the way.
you look at, we're going to talk about numbers in a second, but look at where this program's at now. And it's more than wins and losses. It's the facilities. It's that beautiful new stadium. It's all that kind of stuff. We'll talk numbers in a second, but overall view of where it's a modeled program in the state, especially on the eastern side. Did you see back year one the vision of where it could get to, or was that? And obviously, it's not just you. This community, your community, has a huge role in everything that's happened over the last 18 years.
Well, yeah, you always kind of dream. You always, set those goals up. Hey, this would be awesome to have a beautiful stadium like this. It'd be awesome to win a state title. And, and you sit there all those years and you want those things for your kids and for your community. But I never felt like that's how we measured, success in our program. I remember several people asked me when we won it in 2020, does this vindicate your program? No, I don't even know if that was our best coaching job. I mean, I think there was a couple years we were 4 and 5 and 5. And I'm like, I feel like I had to coach my ass off way more than that those years. I don't think early on in our career, in our staff, I think I probably put more pressure on wins and losses. I think you start figuring out that's not really what it's about. And as a young coach, you figure out where you screw up and where you can make changes. And I think, the second half, and that's probably what I really am going to miss the most is some of the, the things, the time with the kids and the program changes we did make, emphasizing our culture way over wins and losses. And that's stuff I'll miss.
Yeah, you mentioned that state championship, and I was going to talk to you about it because it might not have been your best coaching year, but it was such a weird, challenging year because of COVID and everything that was going on. You look at that year and that state championship, in my opinion, because I remember being up there and I was so happy to be free. I could go up and cover a game because I was getting out of my house. But with everything else that was going on, does COVID make that more special, or do you feel like it took away from what a normal season and a normal championship would be like?
I think a little bit of both. It was so weird, but it was so awesome to be playing every week.
Yeah.
And, it was so different. We're in school, Illinois wasn't playing football. We're playing football. I remember getting an interview request from one of the local TV channels. It wasn't you guys at the time, but hey, we want to come out and see what how the transfers and your movements from Illinois are affecting your season this year. We're doing a 3-part special with Bettendorf, Assumption, and us. I'm like, come on out. And they came on out and said, can we talk to your transfers? I said, sure, we don't have any.
Yeah.
And they were kind of pissy about it. And I says, these are all, we didn't get any move-ins at all that year from, and I know some other Iowa schools did. But we did it with all our kids. But, the schedule was a little different. We had our schedule set up, and then the state condenses it into 7 so everybody can make the playoffs, 7 weeks. We're 3 or 4 weeks in, and then we have a couple of COVID outbreaks at our school. So we got shut down for a week and a half. So we had to not play 2 games.
Yeah.
So we didn't get to play the Assumption game. And at that time, I think it was Waller Catholic game. And our only loss was to Pleasant Valley by like 3 points without our all-state lineman and our quarterback. And so we go in the playoffs with 1 loss. And the way the bracket's set up is there was going to be, because everybody was going to make it, there was going to be 11 buys in the first round. And I remember Jason, our athletic director, coming down to me and going, hey, the state wants to know if you want to buy or not. And I said, we're not making that call. You tell them if they think we're one of the best 11 teams, we'll get a buy. If we're not, we'll go play somebody. And we got assigned a first-round game. And our coaching staff and our players felt extremely disrespected when they didn't think we were one of the best 11 teams.
Yeah.
And we made old T-shirts. We had big old 12 on the back. Said, hey, you're 12th or worse. That's what they're thinking of you. And that really galvanized our kids a lot because, hindsight's easy. I think if we're healthy, we beat Pleasant Valley. But that's easy to say. And I can say it now because I'm not coaching anymore and I don't have to prove it. But, we had a pretty good football team, obviously. But then we go in the first round playoffs, and Burlington COVID defaults, so we don't play that game.
Yeah.
And then every single playoff game at some point we were behind. And I remember when we beat West Delaware at home to go to the Dome, all I kept thinking, Jody and I were walking on, out Scott County Park the next morning, is like, how do we keep our kids without having a close contact or having to quarantine or do something like that for the next 6 days? You know what I mean? It's like, how do you it wasn't about football. It was all about how do you keep your kids not in quarantine so you can go play a game, so somebody else doesn't say you can't play. And that was my biggest fear. It wasn't the game. It was just, how do you not let this experience get taken from your kids?
Yeah. It was such a different, just bizarre world. I remember we went up there. I got COVID from being up there. I got in trouble from our company for getting COVID for being up there. It was just a weird, stupid, crazy time. But I'm joined now by Kevin Tippet, kind of looking back on a fantastic run at North Scott High School. From when you started to now, there's so much different talk about high school sports, high school kids, high school football. This is different. That is different. Kids are different. Is there a big difference between when you started and now? And if there is, what is it?
I think when you get down to the heart of it, you're good players and known to players. The players still want to be coached. They still want to, compete, and you're really good players still have a lot of the same attributes. I think what's different a little bit is, in some instances, and not everybody, and we've been very fortunate with great parents at North Scott, is social media has exploded coverage and one's ability to market themselves. And I think you see, in youth sports, a lot of more of helicopter parents and, maybe youth travel baseball is one, and you see it in some in youth wrestling, and I love wrestling, my kids in youth wrestling, and in youth softball, and I can go down the list. Some of the elite travel teams and all, I know it's all you're doing all summer, and you're dealing with your sons too. In football, I think was one of the last ones that was insulated from that, because it's hard to go play 11-on-11 football. But now with all of these, showcases all over, and these individual trainers who, I'm going to train you to be a D1 athlete, and all these specialized now 7-on-7 groups you see popping up. I think I remember I sitting down with the Iowa football staff and the Iowa State football staff and asking them, hey, do we need to send our players here? Do we not need to send our players there? And, one of the Iowa staff said, if they're a D1 player, they were a D1 player before they went here, in most cases. And it says, you have a good strength program, which we do with Tony Stewart. We have kids that they can compete against every day. And I think the players haven't changed as much. I think it's the culture around the players that have made it a lot more different. If that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. I think that's just the games are the same. The sport's the same. They want to be coached. It's just the obstacles maybe outside of the practice field and the high school field itself that makes things a little different. I talked to Sean Taylor at Moline last week, and he had won 700 games. I asked him his favorite players. I'm going to ask you, who are some of the favorite players you've coached? And I have a feeling I know two of them, but besides maybe, and not even besides, because talk on that. Is that we can talk about victories and championships and stuff like that, but is coaching your boys the most fun you've had? Is that the highlight of your coaching career?
The most fun, the highest of high and the lowest of lows. Winning a state title with Cade, amazing. Having him run off to me and almost tackle me out the field, in the dome was so cool. Working through what we did this year with Jace, probably the hardest thing I've had to do in 27 years of coaching. Yeah. Just with the emotion of, like we talked, how much he's around it, how much he loves just his teammates in North Scott football, and having to go through that. As a parent, you only want, I can sacrifice my head. You always want your sons or your daughters to be happy. And when they're not happy, you're not happy. And having to go through that with him and see how heartbroken he was, that was really hard. And still having to obviously, pour into the other. We had great kids and they did a great job, obviously. But, highest of high and lows of lows is great. Yes and no.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I remember when Jace got hurt this year, I was talking to my wife because I think I texted you a few times to find out how everything was. And it's one of those things that we talked about where your whole life you feel like you can help your kid. You can fix it. I always say to my, come to me. I'll try to fix it. I'll help you. Nothing you can do. Like that's and then that continues to happen throughout life. Unfortunately, is sometimes you can't fix everything. You just got to be there for him. And I know you were there for Jace this year. So take those two knuckleheads away, and nobody's gonna watch this, so don't worry. Name me some of those players that you enjoyed having, and it doesn't have to be the All-Stater. You know, it might be that kid that was the hardest working dude in the scout team.
Yeah, I mean, we've had, and I'm going to get myself in trouble here because we've had so many good kids. You know, I mean, I can go back to Joe Youngbauer, who's an assistant coach over at Pleasant Valley right now.
Okay.
Was one of my, I was still an assistant coach at the time, but he was such a, now obviously he's a phenomenal coach and, and teacher, but, was a hard worker. He wound up, going through a Ryan Girardi, Kyler's uncle who played for me, a Dallas Kowitzel, who was a tremendous three-sport athlete for us here. He's a Hall of Famer, and the Sean Logans. I mean, guys, I think some of your favorite players are the ones that you've been able to stay in contact with and keep those relationships with. All those guys are in the community somewhere, so you still see and run in with them. And as you go through it, that our first, when we really went spread, Jimmy DeVries was our quarterback, and he was our first, offensive, or he was the player of the year that year in the MAC. And he just passed away this past year. I just recently, and he'd text me here and there, what's going on, and those kind of kids. And then there's just so many. It's hard to, the Matt Seixas, and it's not because he was a quarterback, because his parents, Eric and Steph, are friends of ours, so you build those relationships outside of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, all the Peterson boys, TJ Yates was a tight end for us. He was around Zach Peterson's age. I'm going to mess it up in a year or two. Phenomenal kid. And now he's in the Army Rangers, and he's actually in the regiment, doing those kind of things. And, he's having a big impact in other people's lives. And then obviously we got a lot of our recent guys. I mean, this group of seniors is really special because obviously it's Jace's class go through. So I've got a lot of relationship with those guys, and the group that Cade went through with, Carter Markham and Max Solis and a lot of those kind of guys too. And, I think Will Seligman, who we don't win a state title because I don't know if you went up the Xavier game that year.
Yeah.
Xavier's first series, they're going right down the left sideline and take a 7-0 lead. Yep. And Will Seligman's the opposite corner, comes cross field and knocks the ball out through the back of the end zone. Yes. and we get a safety touchback. I mean, that play, I get goosebumps thinking about it. We don't get the rest of the run without that one play.
Yeah, man, and like you can continue to go on and on. It is a tough question. I always joke it's like picking your favorite kid, which for me is Chase of my four boys, but they don't watch the show, so I'll be okay. Game-wise, obviously you just mentioned that Xavier game, and I think I remember every part of it. And it's funny because when that's developing in the first quarter, I'm thinking, oh, man, because that's going in Xavier. It's been a great run, but Xavier. And I'm like, I can remember as he's going down the sideline going, oh, man, this is Xavier. And then you turn around and you win a state championship. So that's the obvious one. Are there any games, like sleepy good games, that you're like, people don't think about this, but back in the week 7 of 2015, this happened or whatever?
Yeah, I'm not going to remember the year, but I remember the people. Second, third year, we're playing at Davenport Central, and we had a wide receiver called Travis Anderson. He went to play in college, phenomenal wide receiver, 3-year starter for us. And we're down 14, 16 points in the fourth quarter to him. And we throw a touchdown pass, and we're like down 6 points, under a minute and a half to go. They've been blitzing us all game. We're on our own, 35, 40-yard line. All they got to do is play. We're out of timeouts. play a soft 2 high shell, and they come out and they play us cover 0. And they man-to-man him on the outside, and they didn't have a kid. Then I'm like, so we just called the flat-out go route, and I'm looking on the headset. I'm like, they're going to cover 0, up 5 or 6. And we threw a touchdown pass. He runs by everybody, and we win the game. We had no business. I think we're down 14 or 21 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that game always kind of is stuck in my head. A couple of the first playoff wins, like at PV with Matt Sation, Ricky Graham, and those guys, because everybody said, well, you can't make the playoffs. Well, then we made the playoffs. You can't, and then it took several years. You can't win a playoff game. And then it was the knock was you can't make the quarterfinals. You can't make, there's all those doors that you knock in along the way, but it was a big knock. You couldn't win a playoff game. Well, then we go on the road. They've sent us to PV, which I think early in the year we'd already beaten, or we had a better record. So the state sent us over there, and then we won that game. And I think that was a big watermark for us. Believe the kids that, hey, there are no ceilings. We can do what we need to.
Yeah, and then of course, those ceilings went to 3 state, the Dome 3 times, and a state championship. Wrapping up with Kevin Tippet, I could do this all night, but you look at that community, and you always want to leave a place better than you started, and it was a good community when you got there, and you look at that facility you have and the program you have, and we talked over the last couple of weeks of the talent that's still there. What does the next coach have to look forward to? Because I think that's probably part of what made it a difficult decision is you're not leaving a bare cupboard. The cupboard's got some stuff in it.
Yeah, we're going to look – if I would have come back this year, we'd look a lot different next year because we started in our offense and defensive line, and I'm just going off the cuff. I think we started 3 sophomores or 2 sophomores and 3 juniors. I know we have 6 offensive linemen coming back that have started at least 1 game for us. Wow. And I know we have 2 or 3 defensive linemen that have started a game for us, 2 returning starters. In that playoff game, those last 3 or 4 games, we were only playing 1 senior in the offensive line and 1 senior in the defensive line. So, up front, we have some kids that didn't play that are going to be pretty good too, I think. So I think we could have a chance to be really salty on both sides, the offensive and defensive line. I think we've got some really good athletes. Our backup was a sophomore year this year, quarterback. Miller, I think, will be really good at in that role. Evan Cruz, he got a lot of reps at tailback this year. I think he can be explosive. I just think, there's a lot of – and our JV team was undefeated. So I think, the cupboard's not bare. I think that the challenge is to fit those pieces together. But and that's kind of what made it hard. There's some really good kids like always here. I'm
not going to get you in trouble, and I'm not going to ask you to name a new head coach because there's not a new head coach.
For it.
So I'm not going to go to that. But with that being said, what would you like? What kind of coach? So stay away from names. What kind of coach would you like to see succeed you to have success in a program that you've built for the last 18 years?
The most important thing to me would be the relationships that they're going to build with the players. Things that we always push to be important that, we talked about a lot of our core values was family, building that family atmosphere, no egos, toughness, caring about each other, somebody that's going to continue that kind of feeling in our program. Jace asked me, he goes, well, what if somebody they hire wants to change everything, Dad? And I said, their prerogative. What if you don't like what they're doing? I said, dude, when I put my resignation and I got no more say in it. And so, I think, I've seen the candidate pool and there's some really good candidates there. I think it's the biggest thing is what makes our community special is the community and somebody that's going to be more than just a head coach that's going to buy into our community and, want to be a part of that community, embrace it, and really love their kids and our players. I think that's what I'd like to see.
It is a great, great community out there. Something that people will look forward to getting in there and doing a lot of good things when it's all said and done. Fast forward to August for me. It's opening night out in Eldridge. Where is Kevin Tippet next August, whatever, on opening night?
Well, I'll probably go to our first game. Friday night, though, Tim Brunken and I were kind of joking around. He's from Dyersville, Beckman, and I'm from Galena. And I don't think either one of us has been back to our alma mater to a game in over 20 some odd years. So we kind of kicked around taking the wives and going and like hitting a bar and grill and going to a Beckman game one weekend and go to a Galena game another Friday night. But that probably mid-season. Probably I'll probably be somewhere. I won't be in the stands. Yeah, maybe I'll lock myself on the corner of the press box somewhere or, offside. But I'll probably be there somewhere on Friday night, our first game.
You're smart because wait till the fall hits. Take the wives up there, let them shop in Galena, go see a football game that night. There's some great restaurants. You know Galena very well. I didn't know you were a Galena guy.
I'm from Galena, yep.
Did you have success there when you were there?
I did. I played for Chuck Cordy, phenomenal head coach. Yeah. We lost in the state quarters to Winnebago and Marion Catholic. That's when Galena was still in 2A. So, but yeah, we had some really good runs. I played on some really good teams.
I feel like I'm missing stuff, and I got to let you go. But real fast, because one I forgot about, the MAC used to be a thing, and now it's district football.
Mm-hmm.
Do you miss the MAC? Should it be the MAC again? Do you like district football where it's gone, where it's come to? If you get to change things, let's say that's your next gig. Your next gig is the commissioner of the High School Athletic Association. What would you do to tweak and change things?
I like district football. I think a hybrid's the best. The thing I miss the most is our rivalry with Pleasant Valley and Bettendorf.
Mm-hmm.
I miss that rivalry.
Scared to play
you got to play us. You said it, I didn't. But I mean, I've said that to Rusty several times. I mean, I've chirped in his ear a lot. Says, "Why won't you play us?"
Well, he will now that you're gone.
I mean, they're two good guys. They're both two good guys, and I love them to death. But I mean, I've begged them to play us the last how many years district play, both of them. I just for Quad City football, I think there's two. They were always really good football games.
Awesome, yeah.
Win or lose, but I felt those kind of games prepared you for the postseason, and they were good for high school football and just in the area. I mean, that's where those games, huge crowds, big, lots of emotion. The players loved them. It just isn't the same when, you're playing a game that's maybe somebody 2-3 hours away.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, those two games in particular, I miss a lot. I wish we'd continue to play that rivalry, those two games.
Any truth to the rumor that Pat Angerer is going to be the new next North Scott head football coach? How would that be, huh?
Oh, he might be, we can only hope and pray, right? He might have to get his language under control a little bit, but I've been dropping F-bomb here and there.
Yeah, I don't think you're a saint by any stretch of the imagination. So, hey, Coach, I appreciate you doing this. I could talk to you for another 2 hours. Really appreciate what you've done for me. We went outside during COVID. We bugged you all the time. And every single time you were accommodating, not just you, but your entire community. So it was a lot of fun. Maybe one of these Friday nights, since I'm not busy and you're not busy, we'll go get a beer and watch a football game instead of coaching.
Oh, yeah. I'm all about that.
All right. We'll do something like that. He is Kevin Tippet. I appreciate you. We'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks, Matt.
All right. He is Kevin Tippet. We got a lot more to get to right here on Off the Air. Don't you dare go away.
Hello, Dan Pearson here of FCA. Our team is thrilled to support Off the Air with our good friend Matt Randazzo. We share the view of the power of sport when it comes to relationships, including the influence of the coach. FCA believes the coach is the most influential person in America. Matt celebrates local coaches and athletes. His content is informational, insightful, and inspirational. Our Fellowship of Christian Athlete team loves partnering with Off the Air with Matt Randazzo while we engage, equip, and empower coaches and athletes in our 23 counties. FCA, the heart and soul in sports.
View from the West, the podcast covering Illinois high school football.
It's going to be a hard-hitting game. It's going to be great football.
Weekly analysis and reaction from around the western side of the state of Illinois.
This is the game we had circled when the year started.
Follow along on YouTube and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's big-time football out there tonight, and I know we can play big-time football.
View from the West. We got you covered.
Are you looking for the Quad City's best chips and salsa? There's only one dude to turn to.
Right on.
Snoop. Hand-cut chips, fried fresh with that crunch you've come to love. And the most addicting salsa with delicious fresh ingredients each and every time. Pick up your chips and salsa, queso, enchiladas, and much more at the Stern Center in Rock Island. To place your order, simply call the man himself. It's Snoop at 309-314-8197 and find out for yourself what the rest of the Quad Cities already loves.
Hello, Dan Pearson here of FCA. Our team is thrilled to support Off the Air with our good friend Matt Randazzo. We share the view of the power of sport when it comes to relationships, including the influence of the coach. FCA believes the coach is the most influential person in America. Matt celebrates local coaches and athletes. His content is informational, insightful, and inspirational. Our Fellowship of Christian Athlete team loves partnering with Off the Air with Matt Randazzo while we engage, equip, and empower coaches and athletes in our 23 counties. FCA, the heart and soul in sports.
View from the West, the podcast covering Illinois high school football.
It's going to be a hard-hitting game. It's going to be great football.
Weekly analysis and reaction from around the western side of the state of Illinois.
This is the game we had circled when the year started.
Follow along on YouTube and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's big-time football out there tonight, and I know we can play big-time football.
View from the West. We got you covered.
Are you looking for the Quad City's best chips and salsa? There's only one dude to turn to.
Right on.
Snoop. Hand-cut chips, fried fresh with that crunch you've come to love. And the most addicting salsa with delicious fresh ingredients each and every time. Pick up your chips and salsa, queso, enchiladas, and much more at the Stern Center in Rock Island. To place your order, simply call the man himself. It's Snoop at 309-314-8197 and find out for yourself what the rest of the Quad Cities already loves. Welcome back to Off the Air on a Tuesday. Thank you so much for Kevin Tippet for joining us. Also, Nicholas Baer. A lot of fun so far this morning. Coming up on tomorrow's shows and throughout the week. Looking forward to tomorrow being Wild Man Wednesday. Of course, my old sports director, Dan Burrich, joins us. If you don't remember Dan, a longtime sportscaster here in the Quad Cities. But Dan also was the inventor, the creator, the originator of KJOC. Local sports radio right here in the Quad Cities. So Dan Burrich, gosh, I can remember growing up with Dan Burrich and listening to him while I cut grass after school or on my way to school. Heck, I think he did 2 shows a day back in the day. So Dan Burrich will be here for Wild Man Wednesdays tomorrow, also catching up with Trenton Wallace, of course, the Davenport Assumption standout and former Big Ten Pitcher of the Year at the University of Iowa, having a great career so far in the Blue Jays organization, making it to AAA last year. He's down at extended spring training in Florida right now, so we'll be joined by Trenton Wallace on the show tomorrow. Excited about that as well. Also working on some more fun things for the rest of the week. Julian Vandervelde joining me later in the week, the former Eagle, talking about, yes, the Eagles. So we will get with him in just a little bit on Thursday. Camille Gear will join us later in the week on Friday to look back at her Caitlin Clark days, covering her at the University of Iowa and so much more. Also efforting Alex Tanny and a few others later on this week. So a busy full week of shows. Efforting to get Tim Baldridge on with us right now. Tim, the former personal coach of Madison Keys when she was a young girl back here in the Quad Cities. We're going to take one more quick break. I'm going to work with Tim to see if we can get him up and moving. If not, we will effort to get him back on the show tomorrow. So one more quick break while I do some work off the scenes, and hopefully we will have Tim Baldridge after the break. We will check that out, and we will be right back. You're watching Off the Air with Matt Randazzo.
Hello, Dan Pearson here of FCA. Our team is thrilled to support Off the Air with our good friend Matt Randazzo. We share the view of the power of sport when it comes to relationships, including the influence of the coach. FCA believes the coach is the most influential person in America. Matt celebrates local coaches and athletes. His content is informational, insightful, and inspirational. Our Fellowship of Christian Athlete team loves partnering with Off the Air with Matt Randazzo while we engage, equip, and empower coaches and athletes in our 23 counties. FCA, the heart and soul in sports.
View from the West, the podcast covering Illinois high school football.
It's going to be a hard-hitting game. It's going to be great football.
Weekly analysis and reaction from around the western side of the state of Illinois.
This is the game we had circled when the year started.
Follow along on YouTube and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's big-time football out there tonight, and I know we can play big-time football.
View from the West. We got you covered.
Are you looking for the Quad City's best chips and salsa? There's only one dude to turn to.
Right on.
Snoop. Hand-cut chips, fried fresh with that crunch you've come to love. And the most addicting salsa with delicious fresh ingredients each and every time. Pick up your chips and salsa, queso, enchiladas, and much more at the Stern Center in Rock Island. To place your order, simply call the man himself. It's Snoop at 309-314-8197 and find out for yourself what the rest of the Quad Cities already loves.
Hello, Dan Pearson here of FCA. Our team is thrilled to support Off the Air with our good friend Matt Randazzo. We share the view of the power of sport when it comes to relationships, including the influence of the coach. FCA believes the coach is the most influential person in America. Matt celebrates local coaches and athletes. His content is informational, insightful, and inspirational. Our Fellowship of Christian Athlete team loves partnering with Off the Air with Matt Randazzo while we engage, equip, and empower coaches and athletes in our 23 counties. FCA, the heart and soul in sports.
View from the West, the podcast covering Illinois high school football.
It's going to be a hard-hitting game. It's going to be great football.
Weekly analysis and reaction from around the western side of the state of Illinois.
This is the game we had circled when the year started.
Follow along on YouTube and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's big-time football out there tonight, and I know we can play big-time football.
View from the West. We got you covered.
Are you looking for the Quad City's best chips and salsa? There's only one dude to turn to.
Right on.
Snoop. Hand-cut chips, fried fresh with that crunch you've come to love. And the most addicting salsa with delicious fresh ingredients each and every time. Pick up your chips and salsa, queso, enchiladas, and much more at the Stern Center in Rock Island. To place your order, simply call the man himself. It's Snoop at 309-314-8197 and find out for yourself what the rest of the Quad Cities already loves. Welcome back to Off the Air on a Tuesday. struggling still to get Tim Eldridge. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure things out with Tim, and we're going to record an interview, and we will have Tim on the show tomorrow. So tomorrow's lineup, Wildman Wednesday, Dan Birch will be along talking everything from Madison Keys to the Super Bowl to the Bears offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator to a lot more. So Dan Birch tomorrow. Also on tomorrow's show, Trenton Wallace, former Assumption and Iowa baseball standout, playing in the AAA, I should say, with the Blue Jays. So we'll chat with Trenton Wallace tomorrow, and then also Tim Baldridge tomorrow on the show as well. So plenty to get to tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you haven't already, please subscribe, please like the podcast, rate it, all those good things. And we'll have a full show coming up for you tomorrow right here on Off the Air with Matt Randazzo. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you guys tomorrow.